just to, I guess, get things rolling, and for the benefit of sort of introducing the basics of the DCP. So the DCP, I've got it started and running, and I'll just run through the layout of the DCP. The DCP is a extra view on the data that's available within your clinical software, and it's used for use by GPs and allied health within the practice. And it takes the information available in the clinical database on the patient that you're viewing and presents it in a very information dense and sort of like an overview of the guidelines as they're applied to that particular patient. And if we look at the guidelines are quite complex. We're looking at the Red Book guidelines and asthma management, diabetes management guidelines, and so forth. And there's quite a lot to remember in that. And if you had to apply it to every patient, it'd take you half an hour to sort of go through all the information that's available and go through the algorithms and present and update everything. So the DCP is an attempt to provide a very information-dense overview of the patient and determine what needs to be done on the day to get the patient up to date with guidelines. And it presents information in color-coded prompts. Prompts are either green, yellow, or red. Green is up to date, yellow is overdue, red is not done. And they're arrayed in different sections. We have a billing items section, clinical, medications, immunizations, measurements, targets, and tests. And it's fairly straightforward to actually get sort of your feet wet with the DCP. It can be set up to run when you log into Windows, and it'll open for every patient. And one of the important things is that you don't want to have an extra piece of software getting in your way. So the most important thing, I think, particularly when you're a beginner, when you've not used it before, is to know how to get it out the way, because your clinical software will be taking up most of the screen, and you can just drag the DCP to the right and it will dock to the right hand side of the screen and get out of your way, so you can do the things that you want to do in clinical software. But say if you get to the end of the consultation, you're determining, maybe I've got a couple of minutes now, what can I do to bring the patient up to date? Well, instead of fishing through clinical software to find out when the last blood pressure was, what it was, and whether you need to do a measurement, you just open up the DCP by dragging it back out, or you can double click and it does the same thing. So if you double click in the title area, it'll go to the right in the docked view, and then you double click on the middle of it and it'll undock. And so now we can assess the guideline status of the patient. And looking through this, the things that perhaps you'd most focus on would be the measurements, getting them up to date. So blood pressure, weight, height, body mass index will follow, medication reviews, and so forth. So these are all things that would need to be updated to bring this patient up to date. And to get information, further information on those particular items, you can just click on them. And when you click on an item, it will bring up information that displays when the last item was. So the last blood pressure measurement in this patient was 2 years, 4 months, and 24 days ago. It's recommended to be done every 2 months, and the reason for it recommended to be done every 2 months is because the systolic was high. So that's the last blood pressure measurement there. So it makes it very quick to whiz through these, and if you click on height, it'll tell you when the last one was. And if you press the escape button when you're in the overview, the view that I'm showing here, it'll take you back to the panel. So I can very quickly go through blood pressure, height, weight, visual acuity even. We can look at when the last influenza immunization was done, so they're recommended to have that. Pneumovax, now it tells you in brackets that there's one previous Pneumovax immunization, and you can click on it and it'll tell you when it was. And it's a 1-dose course. Pneumovax is either a 1 or a dual dose course, depending on the risk factors the patient may have, and the DCP will sort that out for you. So it'll tell you if there's a patient with multiple risk factors that might be due a second immunisation. Zostavax recommended for this patient. And if you're wondering why the Zostavax prompt is there, click on it and it'll tell you. no previous Zostavax immunisations, and patients between 70 and 79. Okay, 70 to 79, PBS covered. PBS covered meaning that it's free for the patient. And the billing item section, we've got here 4 different billing items that may be due for the patient. So GPMP, team care arrangement. Now, these are bicoloured prompts, the GPMP. It tells us that there has been a previous GPMP done, but the review was never done. There's 0 reviews. Okay, and because the GPMP is overdue, we can click on it and get more information, and it tells us that the item 721, okay, was done on the 11th of the 2nd, 2015, 2 years, 4 months and 24 days ago, and it's overdue. So we choose to do the GPMP rather than the review and bring that up to date. So that is the GPMP. The team care arrangement, exactly the same thing, was done 2 years, 4 months and 24 days ago, so we'd aim to redo that today. So that's, you know, sort of $240 worth of work that we can bring on board and aim to get either the nursing staff or the GP can do it, either way. But you know, the DCP enables the workflow where you can quickly assess the status of the billing items and determine whether it would need to be updated or a review done. And the DMMR is the Domiciliary Medication Management Review. It's in the items section. That's the Home Medicines Review, item 900. And if we click on that, it'll tell us that we've done, you know, it was yellow, so that means it's overdue. It's done previously. And here we can see that the last date was 4 years ago. Tells us the minimum claiming period, relevant item number, and it'll actually list out our medications. And the DMMR prompt has a send HMR referral. Okay, now that button there, when we click on that, will actually send a referral via a plugin to the local pharmacy and get the process underway for organising a HMR referral. The local pharmacist is determined via a company that creates a plugin called Medscope, and it makes it very simple to get those underway. HMR is $140 through Medicare, so if you focus on doing, you know, some of those, you can actually improve the sort of feedback from pharmacy on patient medications, because you know, I think that the home medicine review is an underrated MBS item. You have the pharmacist going to the patient's home, sitting down with them, talking about their medications, going through the allergies and checking on those, checking on the interactions, checking that the patient is compliant, checking, you know, all that sort of thing. And I think that it's worthwhile to initiate a few of those. I know in our practice we've done for roughly 250 in the last 6 to 12 months. Another practice that sort of inspired us to take it up had done 500 in a year. So it's well worthwhile to spend a little bit of time and look into doing those. Is that at the sort of pace you're comfortable with, Anne and Michelle? Am I going too fast or too slow?
Nope. No, all good, thank
you. I can't see anything, but I can follow along. I kind of know where you're at.
Okay. It must be very hard when you can't see what I'm indicating on the screen. You know. Anyway, I don't know how I can help that.
Do you want to try and use Screen Connect as a secondary viewer?
No, because the internet connection speed's the issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Just I've got problems here tonight on the internet.
There's a couple of items that are worth pointing out. The CVR, the cardiovascular risk assessment. Okay, so this is a calculation that is performed by the DCP per patient when you've got the relevant information available. And the cardiovascular risk assessment is meant to guide your decision-making process in adding in medications like antihypertensives and lipids to treat cholesterol, so to reduce a patient's cardiovascular risk. If we click on that, there's more information available. And that tells us that, the calculated value was 7 and so forth. And in our functions, which I'll just click on the top function button, and it brings up a little multicolored overlay, there's a cardiovascular risk calculator that allows us to go in and play with the values, so we can see what will happen if we was to drop the blood pressure down to 120. And that might influence, your and the patient's decision-making process as to whether to go on to an antihypertensive or increase the antihypertensive medication. So it's particularly helpful in clinical use. GPs seem to use that quite a bit. And across the bottom we have the pathology prompts. So these are pathology tests that are recommended as per guidelines. So we have, for example, bone mineral density. Now, bone mineral density is often, perhaps underutilized by GPs to test for osteoporosis in the relevant patient age groups. And the DCP presents that prompt and makes it available for GPs to act upon, so they can see what the status is here. Bone mineral density yellow means that it's overdue. And if we click on that prompt, it brings up the information that the last one was done 4 years ago. And what I'd usually do at this point is actually drag out the old result and go through it with the patient and determine whether it really is a required test. The guidelines here are simply that, a guide, and it's up to the individual GP discretion as to whether they go ahead and order a bone mineral density. Obviously, if the last bone mineral density was, the patient's bones are made of concrete and there's no problem with osteopenia, and they're fit and healthy and active and they've got an adequate diet, then you're not going to worry. But if they're a frail person who's not doing any exercise, has a poor diet and had some osteopenia previously, you'd go ahead and do another bone mineral density. Fecal occult blood test. This is an important prompt. There's a lot of information, a lot of interest in getting fecal occult blood test screening done in general practice rather than through the National Bowel Screening Program, which turns out to be a multi-million-dollar, poorly followed-up program. Achieves a patient follow-up rate of around about 25-30%, 40% maybe. I get the, I don't know the exact figures, but it's quite low, and GPs can get a 70 to 80% follow-through rate when they're motivated and spend a little bit of time just enrolling the patient in doing the test. So here we have a previous test when I click on it, and we can actually look at that previous pathology report. On the bottom of the information here, there's a button to send an SMS to the patient. And when we click on that, it brings up a little option to send the patient an SMS with information about the bowel screening program. That information is provided by the Jody Lee Foundation and provides extra incentive for the patient to participate in doing the bowel screening. And we can also bring up further information that links to the Jody Lee Foundation website. So if we're interested in motivating our patients, we can use that as a tool to help in that process. The abnormal atoms is an interesting button on the bottom of the DCP. It quickly just elucidates the abnormal pathology individual atomic results. So if you've got FBE, UNEs and a swag of other tests, it'll just sort out which of the individual items on the FBE or the UNE were abnormal and display those in a list, and it's handy to review. So it's very quick to assess the patient and go through the preventive care stuff, and this enables the GP, instead of having to sort through a long list of tests, a long list of medications, a long list of history items, and then think about the measurements and then think about the guideline algorithms. It just presents information in a very sort of compact, concise way that is concordant with a workflow for improving preventive care. So there we go. That's the introduction to the DCP. And I think I've done a few of these intros now. It is, to me, a sort of a very simple thing, but for GPs who come on board, the color coding and all the amount of colors, the disco screen, can be a little bit intimidating. But the important thing is to remember the double click, put it out of the way when you're not needing it, and then when you've got a moment, bring it in, because preventive care is a slow process of improvement. You're not expected to get everything green on the DCP on day one. It's every time the patient comes back, if you can just do one more thing, you're in a way improving preventive care and bringing patients up to date in a gradual process. It is a gradual process, and it's difficult to do everything due to the time constraints imposed on general practice. So double click out the way and then drag it back out, or double click it to bring back in when you've got some time to do it. And that's, I think that's the main thing. There's a lot of other detailed sort of functionality within the DCP. The DCP can help with doing paperwork. It can help with distributing results, and it can do very simple functions all through this little function overlay. And I'll just go through a couple of them just to sort of indicate the sort of things that we have here. Perhaps the easiest one to demonstrate is the medication pricing. Okay, so if you were with a patient and you wanted to add a new medication, or if you wanted to work out what the costing of a medication was, it's sometimes difficult. Where do you go to get that information? It's not provided in our clinical software. But say if we had a patient on private script for something, and you wanted to work out how much it is. So Symbicort, okay? So patient, say, for example, say they weren't covered by PBS, and you wanted to know what the private cost was. How would you find that out? Well, you can go onto this little section of the DCP, click on it, and brings up the pricing. So you can find out that 200 mic Symbicort is a private cost of around $54. And click on it and opens up the Chemist Warehouse page, and Chemist Warehouse is supplying the information for that. And that is just a very simple little tool, but it can be very handy. We can map the patient address, again just a very simple tool. Goes in and maps the patient address, and we have the paperwork items across the top here, patient-centric documents. I won't go into this in detail, but there's a list of templates within the doctor's control panel that allows you to complete paperwork items very succinctly and rapidly. And often it's the nurses who do this on behalf of patients, on behalf of GPs. So if you, say for example, doing a mental health care plan, if you're a mental health care nurse, or if you're doing a annual health assessment, say a nurse within a practice, the DCP offers the ability to just have a little questionnaire that pops in relevant questions based on the patient's history, and you can go through those and then preview and copy that into a letter in your clinical software. And it's very rapid to do that, and simplifies a lot of the stuff that nurses would otherwise use copy and paste or some other system for doing team care arrangements and mental health care plans and annual health assessments. So the paperwork side of things can really streamline the workflow for doing those items.
So I'm not clear, where are you accessing that from? How did you get into the bit where you're doing that paperwork?
Yep, okay. Paperwork is accessed through the functions icon on the top of the DCP panel.
Right.
There's a little sort of squiggle next to the settings and the close. Yeah, there's three icons there. So the functions icon, when you click on it, brings up that multicolored overlay, and the paperwork is the first three, the red ones. And patient-centric documents is the team care arrangement, GP management plan, annual health assessment, and so forth. Brings up that form. And that's the way you access it. Okay. All right, so that's the paperwork things. Have you had any experience with that in your practice? Is anyone using it? Probably not Anne, but Michelle. The nurses using it, yeah. Often it is the nurses who end up doing the paperwork items, the GP management plans, 10 care arrangements, annual health assessments. GPs are not, sort of interested or sort of time savvy with it, so the nurses do it, and it is something that once you start doing the item numbers and all the, it's difficult to manage. It becomes a little bit complex, and even if you're doing a lot of them, if you're just using cut and paste, if you're using an archaic system, it can be very difficult. Whereas the DCP has a few questions, okay, and we can answer them, and then when we have done it once, we can reload the answers from our previous one, and that brings it in very quickly, and then it becomes extremely simple just to review things, change anything that might have been changed. It automatically sucks in the latest pathology results, the latest measurements, all that sort of good stuff, and spits out the required paperwork. And the questionnaire part of it can be reloaded from the previous time it was completed, and that once you start doing them, it becomes much faster to use the DCP than to use any of the other systems available. Colin, we can I guess we'll call it quits there, and we'll try to get this up onto YouTube as a training video. Yeah.
Yeah, I might just share my screen for a minute if I can. I try that?
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
All right. Yep. So can you see this web page, DCP main self-learning resources? Yeah. So
yes, I can. I got that up. Yep.
Yeah. So this is the main page where I update a lot of resources for the DCP. So, for example, we spoke about Medscope integration earlier. There's we have a YouTube clip for that one. We have resources that explain how we do bowel cancer screening.
Mm-hmm.
So I can open that, and I'll just go into 2 short video clips that explain it. And sometimes they also have guides. So if you had to install the DCP, for example, there's a guide you could retrieve there. So it has like a very simple start to it. Also over here, on the web, there's another web page called Articles on the top right-hand side of the website called Articles. And this is where we post a whole series of articles easily as well. So if you wanted to look at this article about DCP everyday usage, this is where I use a format of different topics around the DCP. So here I've got a YouTube clip by one of the users who works on it. And also down here, I try to maintain later on things about frequently asked questions and knowledge-based articles. The most developed example of that I have is for bowel cancer screening.
Mm-hmm.
So for screening for bowel cancer, this is a very developed topic. So I usually have an introduction to a major clinical topic. Some idea about how it's used in a population-wide manner, some notes about how it's clinically recorded, so where would you find, whereabouts in best practice of medical director it's been recorded, the eligibility criteria, so what criteria it's using to find the patients, and we have those 2 video clips you can watch as well about the bowel cancer screening topic. We have some guides as well. So we have a waiting room sheet that you can use, which prints out automatically when a patient arrives at a practice when they check in. And so I have sometimes some guides that complement it as well. And then we have frequently asked questions, knowledge base articles, things like that. So, example, this knowledge base article would discuss the clinical dimensions around bowel cancer screening and also what you can do in relation to Medicare claims. So there's a way to detail how you could actually claim from Medicare the time you spend assisting patients with bowel cancer screening. So there's a that's really the evidence behind it, because there's some contention over whether you can or can't. So we made the case you actually can, because it's a targeted screening program, not a speculative one. So that's the idea of these knowledge base articles, anyhow.
Okay, thank you.
And then there's just external links and internal links we have about the bowel cancer screening program. So this is the sort of format we'll be extending as well to other clinical topics, because we think it's important that you learn how to use the DCP through actual clinical situations, because I think that way you'll pick up the use of the software and tips and tricks and stuff by osmosis. Yeah. So that's about all I'm going to show for now, and we'll probably run in future webinars around niche topics, for example, around medication management and home medicine reviews. So we'll probably have other speakers who come along and talk about their experiences doing medication management and home medicine reviews using the Docs Control Panel.
Okay. Yep, that's great. Thank you.
So yeah, that's
okay. All right, we'll sign off. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.
And we'll try and work on our format and delivery. All right. I guess, and the only thing would be, you probably won't have a lot of exposure to the DCP initially, at least. It'll be up to the doctors, but
No, I am a doctor.
Tell them.
I'm a GP.
Oh, that's right. You're the doctor. Michelle was the...
Yeah, no, look, I'm quite happy. I have no idea what to do with it, and I just know you just double click on it and it will open up. So I will start using it again from next week. So that it's been useful just to have some idea what to do with it